And a warm welcome to all of you, wherever you are tuning in. My name is Roel Seibing, Senior Trainer for ATLAS.ti. I want to welcome you to the first webinar with the International Qualitative Research Network of 2024. We have a great schedule of presenters throughout the year planned, so we hope you join in for our webinar series to learn more about qualitative research methods. To introduce today's presenter, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague at UBC, Eric Lee.
Well, thank you, Rob, for that, and welcome everyone for that. Happy New Year! I know it's now approaching the end of January, so I hope you all have a great start to the year of 2024. So my name is Eric Lee, Associate Professor at the Faculty of Management at UBC Okanagan campus. So I'm representing the International Qualitative Research Network, so which is a network of qualitative researchers from around the world. It's based in the University of British Columbia Okanagan campus. So the purpose of the network is really engaging to students, scholars from around the world to make qualitative research more accessible, and then also creating a community we can share our insights like today. And so all the webinars we are organizing with ATLAS.ti, thank you so much for hosting this. And then it's free to everyone. So we also will record the webinars for that so you can access in the future time. So today, we are very fortunate to have Dr. Steve Wright and then presenting and the work on removing the transcriptions and bottleneck transforming qualitative research with ATLAS.ti's and auto-transcriptions for that. So Dr. Steve Wright is a senior teaching fellow in qualitative analysis method at Lancaster University, as well as an independent CAQDAS consultant, and then also senior professional trainers for ATLAS.ti's and certified trainers for other leading software package. His particular interest is in method development and translation. So nothing get him animated like something say you can use software for X approach, or we don't really have methods developed for Y. So his recent publication for SAGE research method had been a series of teaching data sets for working with auto transcripts, large corporal of tests, systematic reviews, and undertaking phenomenological analysis approach. So without further ado for that, I would like to invite Dr. Wright to join our webinar. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you both, and hello everyone. So yeah, so this is me presenting on some sort of work that I've developed over a period of time. I used to teach PhD students primarily and other researchers, and one of the big questions that would always come up about transcription was, is there something that will do it for me? And we only have to go back about 5 years. I think I looked back at my slides and the answer was no, there really isn't. You know that bit when you phone up a bank and it says, please tell us which department you want, and you'd say lending. They go, did you say spending? No, lending. Putting you through to spending. That felt like that was the cutting edge then. And then things changed very, very quickly. And so all of a sudden we moved to this position where there is now auto-transcription. And so this isn't just about the how-to, it's about thinking through the potential implications. And it's about thinking, well, what is the role of transcription essentially in technology? So you've had an introduction of me. I'll skip over most of these bits, but I've been a senior professional trainer for ATLAS.ti for a while. I used ATLAS.ti in my PhD, and I did a lot of work on really tight synchronization of multimodal video, multiple video streams, and multiple highly detailed, very, very technical transcripts done in Jeffersonian, like conversation analysis transcripts. And I read the manual, and it told you things like, oh, you can just put speech, these synchronization points in. And I was like, oh, I've got 2 videos. Can I use the same? No. You can just put them back in. And it seemed to assume that the synchronization points were like maybe every couple of paragraphs. I had synchronization points at tenths of seconds apart. I was using sync points to do things like timing pauses. So I remember I looked at the manual. It said, you can't do this. So I exported the XML, took a look at it and went, you can hack that XML. So I rewrote a bit of the manual and uploaded it and said, hey, here's how you can do a load of stuff that ATLAS.ti doesn't think you can in the manual, because it was a slightly unconventional approach. And that's kind of what's got me going on this kind of area. So I've been teaching ATLAS.ti. I'm also accredited for a couple of other ones. I've written data sets for others. I am really pleased to be presenting this for ATLAS.ti, because I have to say, from my experience, ATLAS.ti has nailed this by far the best. It has a phenomenal environment for working with transcripts, and it really opens up so many potentials to, in my opinion, completely transform the way we could approach qualitative research. So what am I talking about? What do I mean? Right, there's going to be a bunch of pie charts. They are basically accurate like this. They are not literal representations of statistical measures. They are much more like, here's a pie chart roughly. But so what do you do when you talk and you listen? Actually, we all know that the way somebody says something is really, really important. How you say something carries so much more meaning than what you say. But when we transcribe, we reverse that. And all of a sudden, it's only what you or they say, and you completely remove, to a fair extent, how the people said that. So we've kind of thrown out an enormous amount of data. Now, what do you transcribe? And a lot of people, when they approach transcription, it's this very sort of, so you've got this slightly what feels like a very split view. You've got often supervisors or people saying the only way to really get in touch with your qualitative data is to manually transcribe it yourself. Only that will bring this deep engagement with your data. But actually, it then frequently becomes this kind of just rush to get it right. So here's a few things to think about. So I'm just going to ask, first question, if you could put up the first poll, for those of you who are here, how do you transcribe your data? Do you transcribe it manually? Do you auto-transcribe and then correct it somewhere else in the transcription software? Or do you auto-transcribe and correct it in a QDA package? I'm basically talking about and advocating for the final one of those three. I'm just really interested to see how many of you, where you are on these areas. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to answer that. And there are some other questions from this as well. So there are different conventions for transcription. And one of the challenges is, how do you mark these things? How easy are they to do? The more you mark these, the more incomprehensible your transcript tends to become. So I should be able to demonstrate that quite visually here. I don't know if you are familiar with Jeffersonian transcripts, but here is a typical Jeffersonian transcript. Let me just zoom that in even more. So this is how you do conversational analysis. This is the sort of transcription I did for my PhD. If you really, really, really want to make your life harder, transcribe like this. What this is trying to show is things like, how long is the pause between each thing? Is there overlapping talk? Does somebody interrupt someone else? Does somebody tag onto something? And so on. But as you can see, it becomes quite hard to read. So that's great. So that's really interesting to see out of you guys how many of you are and have moved over to auto-transcription. So that is already quite a change. If we've got, so if you can publish those results, Roll, that'd be great. So that is a real change. The majority of you are using auto-transcription. You are actually correcting that within the transcription software. Only a tiny number there working in Cactus package. Okay, so the second poll I'll ask Roll to put up is to return back to the things in this slide. Do you mark any of those? So do you mark pauses? Do you mark interruptions? Do you mark breath patterns? Let somebody go or ugh. Those carry a lot of meaning. What about laughter? How do you mark it? And how do you mark different types of laughter? Because nervous laughter is not the same as hysterical, and it's not the same as giggling. What about, how would you differentiate between the two people on the right there? One person goes, sit down. The other goes, sit down. In a classroom, those two instructions could be given exactly the same way. And if they're transcribed, how would you know the difference? What about engagement versus disgust? We might call it emphasis. How do you tell the difference between somebody going, oh, that's interesting, and somebody going, that's interesting, trying desperately to be polite about something they find utterly revolting? This is the thing. Intonation carries so much meaning, but loads of that is lost in conventional transcriptions. We're just trying to get the words down. So that's why I'm interested to see which of the following do you normally mark when you transcribe. So let's have a look. Okay, so apart from emphasis, they are all under half. Laughter is being marked. Overlaps and interruptions, again, those are really important. It depends in part. Typically less important in a one-to-one interview, but in a focus group, absolutely critical to understanding the dynamics. So thank you. Here's a little test for you. I'm not going to actually ask you to transcribe, but this is typically my favorite. So just capturing the difference.
Some for humans. Take a deep breath in through your nose. Now exhale through your mouth softly. Focus on slowing down your breathing into a calm rhythm. Inhale. You are becoming more and more calm. Exhale. You are feeling more and more relaxed. Inhale. Calm. Exhale. Relaxed. Inhale. Calm. Exhale. Relaxed.
Hopefully that's suitably calmed you all down. And we're all feeling very, very relaxed now, because if you had a transcript of that and then you saw the reaction of people, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. So this is one of the things about transcription is really, really important. But it's an act that's actually not really received a lot of discussion. So there's a tendency to make this really instrumental manner. So students are taught the art is to get it down correctly, get it down on paper. And the questions around transcription tend to be like, how do we get it right? Not what have we lost? How do we represent things consistently? But there are a load of biases in this. So Eleanor Oaks, who was a conversation analyst, so conversation analysis is one of the few areas that really got perhaps too interested in the mechanics of transcription. But it's not this idea it's responsible to cultural biases, biased readings, the inferences that are being there. But for most studies based on performance, transcriptions are the researcher's data. But transcription is a selective process, and it reflects theoretical goals and definitions. So throwing away overlaps, pauses, throwing away all of that rich data is one thing. Alternatively, trying to represent it so clearly that that becomes the focus, and actually the transcript becomes incomprehensible apart from to a very small number of people who understand those transcripts, is also excluding. And again, you've created a cultural bias by just saying, here's a transcript that no one else can read, just me and my small research group or this discipline. But the process of transcription hasn't really been foregrounded with empirical studies of verbal behavior. People aren't that interested. Now that is now having this intersection with new technologies. And when a new technology comes along, Douglas Adams, who I hope you all know, and if you don't, you should, who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, one of the greatest books ever, he wrote these rules to describe our reaction to technology. Typically, he writes a lot of very silly and funny things there. So his rules were, anything that is in the world when you're born is normal and ordinary and is just a natural part of the way the world works. You can replace the world born with when you did your PhD, if you're talking academia. Anything that's invented between when you're 15 and 35 is new, exciting, revolutionary. You could probably get a career in it. But anything invented after you're 35, or you've got your tenure track position, and you've finally become an academic researcher, is now against the natural order of things. And you should encourage people to avoid it. And I think we see this when we see stuff around automated transcription or anything around that. It's like, well, transcribing is very time consuming. The analytic and educational payoffs are hard to overemphasize. But actually, we've just been seeing that a lot of people is just about get it down right. So we should be cautious that low cost, low labor approaches to transcription, which automating the process promises to be, do not replace good research practices and do not hinder training of new researchers, because that would be bad if they used automated transcription, but now they're not going to spend 8 hours painfully transcribing data. I think Douglas Adams' rules apply brilliantly. Another quote that I like, just for how pejorative it is, it would appear that after the invention of the tape recorder, much of sociology took a deep sigh, sank back into the chair and decided to think very little about the potential of technology for the practical work doing sociology, social research. And I think, so you've got this like slightly odd thing. It's like, it's new, we don't like it, we don't trust it, you shouldn't be doing that, versus most PhD students going, I don't want to spend 8 hours painfully transcribing an hour's audio, because actually I don't get in touch with it, with the data more deeply. What I find is massive levels of frustration, and I get bored, and actually I just get focused on getting it down right, not thinking about it. But we're in this new and amazing world. So the current state of play is essentially this. OneDrive, Word Online, Teams will generate an automatic transcript. Zoom will generate an automatic transcript. There are other online services. Auto-AI is a very well-known one. Always check which ones are allowed for your data and what they're doing with that data. Is it being used to train other AIs? Are your corrections being used for that? Where's your data going? Is it cleared for research data? So where I work at Lancaster University and also at University of Central Lancashire, Office 365 is bought by the university with a data management agreement about where that data is held, what happens to it. So you can use those free transcription services built in, but you can't use Otter unless there's an agreement. Now, if we go into Microsoft Word Online, hidden below dictate is the transcribe option. You can pick your language. This does do a pretty good job in other languages. I can say upload audio, and bear with, I'm going to take this. This is an example. discussion between me and Christina Silva, who, if you're interested in QDA software, you will know, talking about transcription. So I've uploaded the audio. I will give it a couple of seconds, and this will transcribe it. So I previously downloaded this dialect relaxation video and generated a transcript in the same way. There we go. It's done. Right, that's not very long, but we can see there are two speakers in it. So I can edit this, and I can say speaker 1 is SW:space. That's me. I'd like to change all of speaker 1. Whereas speaker 2 is here, and that is Silver. So I'll change all of those. And then I can simply say add to document with speakers and timestamps. And this has now been added. You've got the timestamp there, and you've got the speaker there. If you're working with ATLAS.ti, it is important to put the colon afterwards because you can do cool stuff later. So I can save this file. I'm going to download it to keep it simpler. He says, optimistically believing he can remember where they've just moved. Save as. Right, I'll download a copy to my computer. Great. Okay, so if I go into ATLAS.ti, I can say project, sorry, document, add a document. I can go and find the video, or the audio in this case. Having imported that, I can say, I would like to add a transcript, please. And hopefully, he says, audio file 1. I can say import. And that is now synchronized. So if I press play,
the data by transcribing manually.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think that if you go through and listen to the recording in detail.
So it is that simple to take audio, generate a transcript, and bring it into ATLAS.ti. Why would you want to do that? Well, I could correct it here. My experience of correcting within Word is, for this length of audio, not a problem. I can listen back to that little bit. But I can't slow it down. And I have had it happen to me, and I know quite a few students who have done this. This is an hour's audio. They get through correcting the first half hour, and then it helpfully reloads it and goes, I'll just reload that for you. I'm sorry, here's the auto transcript back. They've lost quite a lot of work. You could also have the audio separate and be jumping between two programs, but that's really fiddly and annoying. In ATLAS.ti, I can choose to slow this down.
And as you are doing that, you are listening to it and correcting it.
It marks exactly where I am. But the real benefits here are not just correction. So this is my strong argument for why this is a good idea and one option and one approach. So
you can't be in edit mode at the set, but effectively you
at the hang on, that's at the same time. Okay, so it's not set, so I can actually just transcribe this. But the thing that's brilliant here is there are a couple of options. This is where I put that colon in, so I can leave my edit mode. I can say, he says optimistically, I can go focus group coding, and I can say, right, I label my code, my speakers with a colon afterwards. It's found them. Please label CS and SW. So it is now labeled who is speaking. You don't have to do this, you can do this manually. But what's great now is as I am reading and correcting,
you can't be in edit mode at the set, but effectively you can switch back and forth between the two.
I can make some notes here. So this is taking advantage of ATLAS.ti's real strength that you can create quotations. So all I've done is applied a code for who is speaking, but I can make some notes about this. So need to consider mediation of technologies on the research process. So I'm just making some initial notes. So rather than trying to get the words down right, I am listening, engaging with the audio, preserving the link between the transcript and the audio, listening back and correcting. But as I'm doing it, I'm beginning an analytic engagement. I'm not just trying to get the words down, get it done, and oh my God, this is taking me 8 hours. I'm going, oh, well, that's interesting. I need to correct that. In fact, what we could do is start thinking about, where did it get it wrong and why? Is there a consistent pattern and so on? So, in the old world, if we like, there are different levels of transcription. And this is roughly, so this is from Evers 2010, where she really takes a look at transcription. She talks about pragmatic transcription. That's number one up the top here. That's your conventional transcription approach. Takes you 4 to 5 hours per hour of transcribed audio if you're a fast touch typist. Jeffersonian, this is the conversation analysis approach, saying 8 hours plus per hour of audio. I would say at least double that in my experience. It takes a hell of a long time because you've got to get it all lined up and so on. Now, Goodwinian was a further development of that, and you can see those examples here. This was working with visual data where you are not only marking an Jeffersonian transcript of highly detailed text, but you're also interleaving that with descriptions of the action on screen. Now, in my PhD, I did some of this because I was marking what was happening between two people as they judged beer. What were they doing? What were they picking up? What were they doing? And exactly. So I had these unbelievably detailed transcripts that were transcription not only of speech, but also action and also from other video sources. But before the tape recorder, most transcription was what would now be called gisted. You're just making notes. You're making semi-verbatim notes, unless you're a master of shorthand. And even then, that would be basically for comprehensive verbatim notes. You were just taking the gist of what was spoken, quite quick. This has been the bottleneck up until now. That time, 24 hours to transcribe an hour's video with all the detail, and most PhD students, most beginners, I would say we're talking 7 to 8 hours to transcribe an hour's audio. So pragmatic can now be generated in straight away. So here we go. That you saw how quick that was to generate a transcript. How long does it take to correct it? Well, if you're in a nice integrated environment like ATLAS.ti, where clicking here shows you the same thing. So I'm just going to close this one down and do the same thing we came up with earlier. So Dalek relaxation here.
Welcome to Dalek relaxation for humans. Take a deep breath in through your nose.
I can listen back to it, I can correct it, but I can also make these nice notes. As well as making notes, I might start thinking about some initial categories. So, for example, either the language, is it an imperative? You are giving an instruction, or is it an observation? That's wrong. So let me just play that back.
Eggs and stresses of
The aches, not the eggs. Aches and stresses of daily life are floating away. Your attention has been exterminated. This is no longer. So I can start thinking and analyzing as I correct. I can make notes about each individual segment. So instead of this, I've just got to get the words down. I'm actually really having an analytic engagement. It's no longer 4 to 5 hours per hour. Roughly, working in a nice integrated environment like this, I reckon 2 hours per hour of audio to not only get a fully accurate transcript, but also to start that analytic engagement, those initial notes that you're making, and even potentially doing some coding. Now, Jeffersonia, well, do you need the whole thing in Jeffersonia, or do you need to identify the bits? So what we might do here is, bear with me, we might take this bit of video here, or this bit of video, and that's not got a huge amount. Let's grab Louise's interview. Okay, so in this,
right, those boots not incredibly hot in this weather.
No, they're too comfortable.
what I might be thinking about here is thinking about, okay, this section here is actually all the preamble. And that's what I'm interested in. So I might select this, apply a code that just says, I want to transcribe this as to improve. I'm going to say that bit. I'm going to come back to that bit because I want to do that in a lot of detail. And actually, I could.
From New Zealand.
Yeah.
Big sort of bloke-sized tag boots, and they're toasty, but I couldn't wear them.
So here I might be saying, right, this bit I want to develop this up to a much more detailed bit where I'm starting to mark the pauses. I can then use the specific bits here on the time to go down to tenths of second. So I might be literally selecting the bits that I'm interested in. Goodwinian would involve things like, let's go to this video, and here, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, right, edit this and give a description. So so I'm actually starting to use this environment to do that detailed work and say, yep, I want that to be synchronized, and I can add sync points. Gisted would be literally, you know what, I'm just going to listen back to it and maybe directly on video instead of anything else. I could just create this and in here write some notes about what's going on. So each of these transcription approaches can be supported with this. But so they've had the ability to do this for years. I mean, ATLAS.ti was fantastic from version 7 at doing this synchronization. I built a huge amount of my PhD analysis based on that ability. ATLAS.ti is fully integrated, it's completely seamless, and it has a two-way synchronization. What I mean by two-way synchronization is you click on the video, it jumps to the right bit of the transcript, you jump to the, you go to the transcript, and it jumps to the right bit of the video. So I can go either way round. No other software comes close to this. You don't really need to do any cleanup. ATLAS.ti has done a very, very good job of, you can bring a VTT file in and it will mostly clean it up to you. Now, this changes a little bit because Microsoft keeps changing the way that their VTT files arrive. One thing I would really emphasize is important is when you bring a video in and you bring the auto transcript in, make sure it's the best one you can get. So for example, in this one, there's no speaker labels. If I had to transcribe that in Word, I could have labeled the speakers. Probably, rather than being in that rush to get this done, you could go, let's get the best version of the transcript in first. It will save you time. But what are the implications? That's what I really want to draw on for the next 5 or 10 minutes of me talking. So to me, there's the 3 key things. You are able to maintain what I call the 3 T's: the tone, the tenor, and the tempo. So tone of voice, do they sound happy? Do they sound excited? Do they sound sad? Those are really, really important for many research questions. The tenor. How do you tell if somebody's being sarcastic? That's a classic one. Is it being spoken in humor? Is there an underlying threat? Are they choosing their words very, very precisely in order to perhaps be a bit evasive? And also the tempo. It is very different to hear somebody say, "I'm all right," versus, "I'm all right, all right." Tempo matters. So by maintaining the link here, you now have
So, yeah, quite a lot. But recently, because of exams we haven't.
You can go back and you can you can listen again, you can go back to the meaning that is coming through from the voice. So not only it's the correction, but now you can go back and listen. You then have the possibility of actually coding that. So we could say, here we are going to create a quotation and we're going to apply a code for emotion that you can't do without the synchronized transcript. So we're actually adding more detail by working with an auto transcript that's synchronized and doing it manually somewhere else. I've tried to suggest 3 possible approaches that are a little bit more thinking beyond this. So if there's no longer a bottleneck in getting the transcription, what can we do? Well, most of what we've looked at so far is what I would call immersion and engagement. This is basically the old way of transcribing, but instead of you transcribing, you are going to listen to it, correct the transcript, and start making some notes. So you're going to have to listen to the whole interview. You're going to have to listen to it more than once. You're going to be really immersed. But instead of spending 8 hours trying to get the words down, you are going to spend an hour listening to it, alongside maybe half an hour correcting and making notes. So I've kind of shown that already. What about selection and indexing? So that would be about going, right, we've got a huge amount. Now that we've no longer got to spend 8 hours transcribing, which meant that I could only interview 10 people, what about if I interviewed 30 people and then selected and indexed the bits that were either really relevant to my research or where I wanted to do them in much greater detail? So this would be that approach to going earlier on this, right, I want to return to this bit and do this in great detail, or I want to listen to this with great care. But you've got the possibility here of literally just expanding the amount of data you can work with, because you're going to go through and you're going to find the bits that are really, really relevant, e.g. where they're 30 people, broad ranging interviews, but only in this bit they actually talk about the specific situation. It would be more useful for me to look at 30 people a little bit than 3 people in great depth, every bit understood. So you might be working through and transcribing, say, to correct or to transcribe in more detail. You would then return to those coded segments to correct them, and correcting or adding a lot of additional detail, e.g., particularly with visual data, right, that bit is relevant. I'm going to really go through that Gibsonian approach but not for a whole hour's video. That's the bit where something is happening. And the final approach is this one, searching and sampling. So this is really starting to think of a larger scale data. What you are going to be doing here is thinking about, well, where are the errors? Are they consistent? We're going to be guided by the text. We're going to accept that a lot of this data is incorrect. Well, sorry, that mostly it's correct, but there are some errors. So what I need to do here now is I'm going to do a search. Find. Oh, now I always get, sorry, I'm jumping between things here. Where's my text search? Text search, here we go, right. So I'm going to search through all of the text, all of these transcripts. They're quite long interviews, and I'm going to look for the word hands. And I'm going to say, show the results. Now, here we go. Steve speaks much about hands. So I'm now, sorry, bear with me. This is a little bit. So here we go. Did he speak much about hands? So what I want to do with this is I want to load the relevant video and get it jumped to the right place. Sorry, it's this video here. There we go, great. And I would then be saying, so bear with me a bit, this does take a little bit of getting, okay. There we go. Steve speaks much about hands. We should be able to jump and listen specifically to these bits together. It just hasn't loaded the right video on that side. There we go. Right. So it talks about hands. You kind of got to get the thing set up there. Now I can go and listen to this.
I have not heard Steve speak much about hands.
It's not hands, it's hands. And this is a consistent error. So I've listened to it, one thing, and I've gone, well, I keep saying hands, hands, hands. Right. Everywhere that this word comes up, I want to listen to the synchronized video and go, is it?
I've not heard Steve speak fondly of hands.
No, it is consistently, there is a word that is consistently mistranscribed. So you can use this, so you can go like, you know what, we're getting an idea, we're listening to this, we're guided by the text, we're searching the text, we're looking for specific things within a large corpus of text. Hang on a minute, that doesn't read right. Well, because they're now synchronized, you can go back and listen to that very specific bit and correct that. So this would be much more about text mining. Additional bits can be linking the two together. So I've talked about, so where you might say, you've got a bit of video here. Having just done a little pendulum. So here I might be going, this bit is describing what's going on in this bit of the video here. And this is where ATLAS.ti, the ability to link a segment in one bit to a segment in another, go, this really helps you understand what's going on, because actually this text means very little without the video. So you can also do linking together. Now I'm just going to pick that up with a final point, and I am aware of the time. The fourth T, translation. You can, one of the other great things with ATLAS.ti can be, let me just open this the proper way, right, Hindi monologue. So here we have a Hindi transcript.
वहां पहुंचे तो देखा पूरे टापू पे बस चूहे ही चूहे चूहे ही चूहे.
Now, how do you transcribe that? Well, what you can do again is you can select a bit and say, I need to translate this. And then you've kind of got two options for translation if you're working with ATLAS.ti. You've either got the quotation comment, where you can literally write that translation in, or you could link it to a transcript, to a second transcript that was in English. Sorry, we've got that's the Hindi translation. So I've not, but what you can do is you can link it to a second one. So you've either got an option. One thing I've worked with a student recently, they were told, can you translate all of your transcripts? And their heart had sunk. And what I was talking to them was, all right, put them in an auto transcription again within Word Online. We can take this and I could say I would like to translate this entire thing. I can't remember where translate is. I would like to translate to Spanish. Let's pick Spanish because I speak just about enough to be able to and say, okay, I'm going to translate, to Spanish. And document, to say Spanish, translate. And I could then take this and bring that into ATLAS.ti. So I'll actually do that. Download that. And here, let's close all tabs. Oh, that's the wrong project. I'm going to bring in audio file 1. I could then say I'm going to add another document in Spanish, put that over here, and I could go through these and say, right, this bit here, this translates that. So there are two ways of working with translation as well, but all of it is still linked back to the original audio. So where could this go next? Final slide. What I would love to see, I think, would be a real development. So this idea of being able to work with larger sections of data. Now, at the moment, you've got to kind of listen to it, or you've got to go through and go, that word looks a bit weird. The AI coding that has come into ATLAS.ti, to me, one real potential there in its next iteration, and these iterations are coming so fast, would be to be able to say, can you identify words that aren't expected? That's what large language models should be really good at. Can you identify everything that looks like a transcription error? For example, a word that's just anomalous and never comes up again. The other thing is that some VTT files do have a confidence interval. Now, at the moment, you can bring the data in, but that confidence interval isn't being coded. So again, is there a confidence difference between 0.93 compared with 0.91 compared with 0.7? If those could be added in, I really think you could do even more with this, because if you could then bring in huge amounts of automatically transcribed stuff and just say, can you go find the things that look like errors, and then start working on text mining, we are moving out of this world whereby qualitative research is very, very slow and very, very detailed. It has to be, into a world whereby other approaches become really open. What could we do if we could look at larger amounts of data? We'd have to come up with new methods, but I think that is absolutely imperative right now. So the details of this, there are some data sets for Sage, which take you step by step through all of these approaches in ATLAS.ti, and also how to generate them. I've also got some tutorials on www.cacdas.co.uk, where there is a whole section called auto-transcription in Cacdas, and it takes you through this approach and these things step by step. There's the references, and I really welcome your questions. So thank you for listening. I hope that's been useful. I know I've gone through it in a clip, but it has been recorded, so you can go back to it and watch those bits a bit slower.
All right. And thank you so much to Steve throughout this hour. Very insightful, very detailed, which is why I went through with the clip. But as mentioned previously, this webinar will be recorded and posted to the ATLAS.ti YouTube channel. Make sure to check back shortly for updates for this recording. We will be we'll be discussing this topic for the balance of the hour. Please remember, if you have any questions, you can post them to the Q&A section, and we will try to field them as we go by. So maybe a question off the top of my head is kind of explores like the importance of transcription in the first place, and particularly conversation analysis. And I understand, as someone who conducts ethnography, I understand the importance of transcription. But getting into the detail of transcription, like pauses, emphasis, laughing, what have you, is it more about clarifying the meaning to the researcher, or as in clarifying, what is said to the researcher?
Yeah, as with everything, it's about it being appropriate to your research questions. So conversation analysis was developed to kind of try to understand, how do people interact? How are the most basic form of social interaction? Like, how do you know that the person you spoke to understood what you meant? And one of the real things is, what we say is always indeterminate, and the meaning arguably is more created by the person, how they respond. So I heard what you just said as a question, but I could have left it as a statement and just got, I agree. And you'd be like, no, I meant that as a question. So that would be a breakdown. And that's what it's amazing for. So some things, conversation analysis is a phenomenal tool. So I've seen really beautiful analysis done when it's like, right, at what point did this interview just go south? And actually that detailed look, when you're just like, hang on a minute, it's at that point when somebody, you thought you were asking a question, but they heard it as a statement, they reacted angrily, is one of the ways. It's fascinating and really, really insightful in particular areas. So I've got some colleagues who work in dementia studies, and conversation analysis is an incredible method for just understanding. It's like, how do you know that, how do you understand that somebody's just going, you just don't understand? That's not the expected response. But what I find interesting, having done some work with conversation analysis, is they didn't take the transcript as a mirror of reality. They took it as, it's like, how can we take something that is ephemeral and turn it into something we can go back to and look at and try to understand and look at the mechanics of conversation? And I think so illustrated, it kind of came from ethnomethodology, and most qualitative methods, ethnographic, grounded theory, phenomenological, would generally be like, all right, here's an interview, what did this person mean? Let's understand the meanings they're giving, what are the themes coming out, what are their concerns, what's their lived experience. A conversation analyst is much more likely to come at it and go, how do we know it's an interview? What? So, well, what is the interactional system here that tells us this is an interview. How, if you looked at a transcript of this session, how would you know that we've just kicked out of me presenting to us having a Q&A?
Yeah.
So it looks at the world through a different thing. But I find all of these lenses are really interesting because they just throw things that are sometimes assumed into a very bright light. Like, what have you just thrown away in your transcript? But the ability, I think, that is so rich with that is irrespective of how detailed your transcript is. To an extent, does it matter anymore? Because the reason for the transcript was because you had a tape recorded thing. You couldn't easily listen. But if now I can literally just go, oh, hang on a minute, what was it they said there? Oh, let's go here. Let's literally go and listen to it at the moment. To an extent, you've changed the relationship. You can now, instead of having to represent it on paper because the tape's on a massive reel-to-reel locked away, you can now go back to it. And I think it's all about trying to tease out the possibilities technology brings. And in particular, as we sit on the edge of AI analysis, it becomes so vital. So I'm just going to stick that one back up there because to me, this stands out. It's like so much that I hear is people going like, you should have done it the way I did it when I did my PhD. But what I tend to be teaching my students is it's like, the way you should be using ATLAS.ti this week is totally different from the way I was using it in December because it's changed that fast. And I think if we all fall into that Douglas Adams thing, where it's like everything invented after I did my PhD is against the natural order of things, sociology is going to be a really dull place. It used to be the pinnacle of creative engagement with technology and what can we do with this to discover the world. It seems to have become a place where it's a bit like, can you do what I did, which is the same as the person before me, the same as the person before me. So a lot of it is about trying to provoke people and to go like, wow, if you can do this, what could you do? Yeah, that was a very long answer.
No worries, no worries. No, I think the only thing I'll add to that is, as technology changes and thus as methods change, the standard for what passes as research rigor will also change. So like, how do you know what you know, I think is kind of embedded in the questions that you're asking. How do you know what you know? Addressing that question is always going to be a moving target once, as methods and technology develops. So there's
I think it's the idea that technologies aren't enemies of method. Like I keep hearing people say it's like, oh, you'll never really get as in touch with your data if you don't transcribe it yourself. And I'm just like, no, I'm so much more in touch with data when I've listened to it and thought about it at the point of listening and made notes and really thought about what it means, rather than just trying to get the words down, which is an administrative, not an intellectual task. So I feel like it can free you up to be much more engaged with meaning, with thought, with analysis, with engagement. Not, oh, it's not what I did
exactly.
when I did my PhD, so I don't trust it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think we have time for one more question. I believe Eric had a question. Perhaps you'd like to pose it, Eric.
Sure. Just like, yeah, I did post on the Q&A today. Just like, thank you, Steve, for the wonderful presentations for that. So I'm just thinking about nowadays, but we see a lot of teamwork among teams, but that and how you meaningfully engage, let's say, team members in the transcription process, especially now we talk about the technologies and also everyone have access to the shared platform. I'm particularly interested in what would be your recommendations, especially for those collaborators who might not heavily engaged in the data collections or the initial transcription process. So I think you talk about that in your previous answer, but I would like to kind of see your insight. Yeah.
So, I mean, this is one that I see quite frequently where either transcription is outsourced. So all those that person who to their PhD students is saying you can't get in touch with your data unless you transcribe it yourself, immediately as soon as they get a research grant spends it on outsourcing that transcription. So apparently it's not that important. It can be a challenge. So with teamwork, this kind of thing needs a bit of delicacy and some consideration, because one challenge across with ATLAS.ti, but across all software like this, is if you edit the underlying source and then do a teamwork and you've got two versions that are different, that will cause problems if you've also coded it. So you do have to have some very clear protocols in place of who is going to edit transcripts when, who's going to code them, so you don't end up with two different versions of transcript and two different projects trying to merge them. I've never seen it as an insurmountable problem, but it's one that you have to acknowledge and know about, because all of the other stuff says you're fine to do teamwork, just don't edit the underlying data. And this is all about editing the underlying data. In practice, it's okay as long as two people don't edit the underlying data separately. So you've just got to carve it up between different people. But you have to be aware of the implications of teamwork. But one of the things that can be so transformative with this is for the ability of the person who wasn't at the interview to go back to the audio. Because the ability to have somebody say, oh, I think this is a really important segment. Oh, really? Should we listen to it? That can be transformative, because so often the meaning isn't in the words. It's in the way they were said. And keeping that link easily, I think is you know, for certain research questions, it's critical. If you are looking at anything that is affective, emotions, then you're not going to get it from black and white text. So being able to recover that data is so vital. But yeah, with teamwork, so I think it has huge benefits for teams, but the practical implications of doing that teamwork is you're just going to have to be a little, you always have to be careful with teamwork. You just have to be carefuler.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, that's a great answer. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you to Eric, and thank you to Steve. And we will have to leave it there so we can respect everyone's time. This has been a very insightful webinar on a topic that many might find kind of mechanical, but there is a lot of good research that can be done when transcription is done richly and transparently, and I think Steve has showed us how some insights into getting into that level, and so we really want to thank him for taking the time for this presentation today. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that will do it for the first webinar of the International Qualitative Research Network in 2024. We have more on the way. Be sure to check out the trainings page on the ATLAS.ti website and the International Qualitative Research Network website. Search it on Google and keep up to date. Check back regularly for future webinars as they are announced throughout the year. For now, for Steve Wright, for Eric Lee, my name is Roel Seibing. Hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Steve. Yeah.